Welcome. My name's Alexander Thein. I'm on the staff at UCD, and I've prepared a lecture on amphitheatres to help you with topic 10 on Roman art and architecture. Archaeology. So Pompeii is where we're going to start. We're going to go to Rome, to the Colosseum, and we're going to highlight a couple of contrasts, similarities, and a little bit about the evolution of the amphitheatre. So this is Pompeii, the town. Just to locate you in terms of where the amphitheatre is, you can see it on the right-hand side. You can see where the theatre quarter is, also where the forum is. Some of the past questions ask you to identify the location, so this will be useful for you for that. A few basic facts about the amphitheatre itself. So this is just to give you an aerial view of the amphitheatre. It's set against the corner of the city walls. If we think about scale, 150 by 105 meters. When we get to the Colosseum, you'll see that the scale is a lot larger. The capacity, 20,000 spectators. So that is a very large number for a provincial town. Again, the Colosseum is probably just over double the size. And the date, roughly 70 BC. And this is why the Pompeian Amphitheater is so important. It's the earliest surviving amphitheater, the earliest known amphitheater. So there might have been some that were older, but this is the earliest one that we have. And just a small note on the word. Amphitheatrum is a Greek word, but the form, the architectural form that we have, the oval shape, this is a Roman innovation. So we do have a Greek word being used, but it's very much a piece of Roman architecture. And I move on to this image of how it might have looked. So the previous one was a photograph. This one is a reconstruction drawing. And this is to show you, to illustrate something about the construction method. So with the Pompeian Amphitheatre and with the Colosseum at Rome, concrete is the key construction material. But it's done differently. It's much less refined in the case of the Pompeian Amphitheatre. It's much less advanced. And just to describe how it was built in very basic terms, to start with, the arena area, the central area was dug down. That earth was then filled up on the sides to create height. And on the exterior, a large retaining wall was built around two sides. The city walls were used on the other sides in order to keep that bank of earth in place. And it's for the retaining wall that concrete was used. This image shows you, I think, the way in which the arena area was dug down. So when you look at those two blue arrows, the central blue arrow is showing you where ground level would be if the arena had been at ground level, but they're digging down in order to make it easier. So to create the extra height, it's easier to dig down. So the retaining wall then, this is where the concrete comes into place. So you've got a great weight of earth, and the concrete retaining wall gives the strength in order to hold that earth in place. And what we can see, the main technique is set concrete with a facing of irregular stones. And that's the terminology that I've got listed, opus incurtum. If you go in closer to this image, you'll see that surface coming through very well. The other thing that you can see, which adds to the strength of the wall, is the use of arcades. So these barrel vaults are creating the extra strength. So it's actually stronger to create these concrete vaults, one after the other, than to have a solid wall. You can also see two exterior staircases. So this is one way in which we see an evolution from Pompeii to the Colosseum, that here, this is, again, it's the earliest known amphitheatre, and the strategy that's being used to get crowds into the central seating area is to have these exterior staircases. You climb up the steps on the outside, and then you walk down to your seats. There are a few tunnels but much fewer. With the Colosseum, you're entering the building and you're negotiating a whole series of staircases inside the building. This is slightly more basic and slightly different. So this is just to show you again the ground plan, the exterior stairs going up at the bottom, and then on the top right I've got you one of the tunnels that goes down. This particular tunnel is the one that I've got with the blue arrow, and if you look at that plan you'll see how the tunnel goes down, then it turns to the left, and that gets you into one of the big main entrances that leads into the arena. There are a couple of other smaller tunnels that get you to the lower parts of the seating, where you then turn around and then you come upwards. But generally speaking, most people entered from the top, and it shows us how the architecture is creating a social differentiation in how you enter the space. So generally, high status individuals would be seated near the front. You can see on this image here that there's a barrier, a physical barrier that separates the first 6 or so rows of seating from the rest. And it's these very large entrances at each end of the arena, tunnels going down. That's how you would enter if you were in one of the posh seats. Otherwise, you'd be going up the stairs on the outside. The other thing that I think this slide shows very nicely is the way in which we have that earth bank that's between the arena and the retaining wall. So eventually stone seating is added, but in the original phase, it would have been wooden seating. We have some inscriptions that show that the stone seating was added in segments, in phases, after construction was finished. So the amphitheatre is important for a number of reasons. It shows us this social hierarchy of society on display, magistrates at the front, certain privileged groups at the front. If we think about what actually happens in the arena, gladiatorial combats are the most obvious activity. Add to that also wild beast hunts. In the Pompeian context, we don't have trapdoors or any other architectural features underneath the arena that would allow for lions and various other wild animals. So maybe we're talking more about boars, bulls and bears in the Pompeian context. So Rome will be different. All of these activities are called munera, they're called gifts. They are put on by a donor. And in the next couple of slides, I'll say a bit more about that, how the gladiatorial games are a benefaction. But just looking at the evidence that we have wall paintings, we have graffiti, and we also have advertisements. The wall painting is interesting. It shows us a gladiatorial fight, and it's from Pompeii, and it's a painting that was discovered only about 18 months ago. So this is very new. The graffito, a drawing of a graffito, is interesting for another reason. It shows the way in which we have popular engagement with the games. This is something that was drawn by a spectator. And also we can see the way in which we've got the names being listed, and also the number of wins, the number of losses. So you can sort of see the way in which there's a sort of fan culture, and also presumably this is linked with betting. And the image on the text on the bottom, that's an advertisement for a set of games. There are a number of details that you can see there, the dates, the numbers of gladiators, a small number of details, some things that we don't see. So we don't see the time, for example. There's no price, and there is a reason why there's no price. It's because the games are being paid for by, in this case, Decimus Lucretius Celer. And this idea of benefactions, donations, comes out really clearly on this advertisement. So this is the actual Latin. And the thing that you can see is that just looking at the typography, the lettering shows that the most important thing about these games is not how many gladiators there will be, what day it's going to be on. any of the other details that we might think are important for a spectator. What is important is who is paying for it, what is the name of the person that's putting on the show. And the reason for that is that the benefactor wants to get the social prestige and the benefit from it, this idea of patronage. Either you have been elected and you're showing your gratitude to the voters, maybe you are trying to put yourself forward for election in the future, you want that name recognition. Either way, it's all about the person who puts on the games. This will be important in the Roman context as well. The Colosseum is built by the Flavian emperors. It's the Emperor Titus then puts on games for 100 days when it's built. He wants the credit, the regime wants the credit for that huge. So you can put on games, you can pay for buildings, and in the Pompeian context, we have an inscription from the two individuals who were local officials at Pompeii who paid for the amphitheatre at Pompeii. So it's a big, huge expense. If we look at the fourth line, there's more detail, but you can see in the Latin there's this word spectacular. That's actually the word that is being used in this inscription for amphitheatre, and it's a sign that the word amphitheatre only actually became current later, and this is the first amphitheatre. The name of the building hasn't yet been, the building type hasn't yet been fully established. So one of the questions that might come up is, how do we know that the Pompeian Amphitheater dates to around 70 BC? Partly it's this inscription, knowing who these two individuals are when they were active in the city. Partly it's also the construction technique. So I mentioned opus incurtum, people analyze and can date buildings on the basis of their construction techniques. So we've been talking about patronage, the way in which you get prestige from building projects, from putting on games. Sometimes this is a very well-known image of the Pompeian Amphitheatre. It's on a wall painting, and it describes a historical event when the Pompeians and rival fans, spectators from the neighboring city of Nicaea came to blows, and there was this riot which came to the attention of the authorities in Rome. And one of the reasons it came to the attention of the emperor is because behind the brawl and behind the riot, the elite sponsors who'd been paying for the games were involved in some sort of intrigue in Rome as well. And the result was this penalty of the games being banned locally at Pompeii for 10 years. So the politics is intimately linked in this case with political violence. So I move to Rome, to a bit of comparison. This is an image of the Colosseum on a model of Rome that we have, just for comparison, starting with some of the basics of the scale. So in this case, it's 188 by 156 meters. Capacity is more than double Pompeii's amphitheatre. It was constructed, as you can see there, in less than 10 years. And I mentioned already those games that were put on to celebrate the inauguration of the building. So we call it the Colosseum. It's called the Colosseum because it was located next to a colossus, a colossal statue of Nero, which is what we can see with the blue arrow. Nero owned all of this area. There was a lake there. It was part of his domicilia, his private park, his palace. And this was a really big symbolic move to open up this private estate to the ordinary people of Rome, to create a structure in the center of this area that would be a people's palace, something dedicated to the entertainment and enjoyment of ordinary people. So it's a big statement, political statement, and it's a way of the Flavians, the Emperor Vespasian and his sons Titus and Domitian making a break with the past and presenting a positive image for their new regime. Some details about construction. So if we go to the inside first, this is again where we see the importance of concrete. So there's this massive foundation of concrete. When we look at this, we're looking at brick and concrete. There are other materials being used, but it's the concrete that gives it that structure, allows for the creation of these tunnels, stairs, various ramps, and also, if you can see here, there's a large substructure underneath the arena. So that's where animals are kept in cages before they'd be let up through trapdoors. You'd keep stage sets and machinery down there. Gladiators could also appear from underneath. There are actually some plans right now to create a permanent stage structure on top. So this is something that's just been in the news this week. But you can see a small section at the far end there. So that's the interior skeleton of the building. On the outside, it's much more conservative, much more elegant. And we have these travertine blocks being used for the exterior galleries. I'm showing you two coins. The one on the bottom indicates that in the various arcades, so those arches that are facing outwards, those would have held statues that you'd see from outside. So it would look like a big, huge statue gallery from the exterior. About 80 of these going all the way around the building. And that's the exterior, a very familiar view of the preserved side of the Colosseum. And one thing that has been observed is the way in which, as you go up, you've got those three galleries and the architectural order changes as you go up. So the ground level is the Tuscan order, which is very similar to the Doric, Ionic, then Corinthian, and then you have the Attic story with Corinthian pilasters. So it gets more ornate as you go up. This side is the only side of the Colosseum that survives. The reason it survives is that during the medieval period, a lot of the Colosseum was used as a quarry for building materials. The marble seating from the interior was taken away, but this side was kept because there was a road going past that was part of a processional route, and this was just such an elegant structure that it was kept just purely for its aesthetic value. This is the ground floor, and it's often mentioned when you read about the Colosseum, the way in which there was a ticketing system where you have doorways marked with numbers, ways in which you would then go up the various stairs and find your seat very quickly. I just want to show you this one because it has those numbers over the arches of the entranceway. And just as we finish off, thinking about what's actually done in the amphitheatre. So Rome is slightly different from Pompeii. You do have the big wild animals that are being imported from North Africa. So in this one, you can see a leopard, I think it is, and various other animals. Also, unlike in a provincial context, in Rome, one of the elements of the activities in the amphitheatre are public executions. So being condemned to the beasts, various other types of public executions are attested as well, in addition to gladiatorial combats and animal hunts. And just finally, just to put those two examples that we've looked at in a bit of a broader context, the amphitheatre is a very widespread architectural form found in all parts of the Mediterranean, but particularly in the West. It's a sign of Romanization, a sign of the spread of Roman culture. This is an example from the Danube frontier in modern Austria. Another one from Spain, which had a very large Roman diaspora involved in olive production. And another area that had a very large population that moved over and settled from Italy is North Africa. It's probably one of the best preserved amphitheatres that survives. You can see it's in Tunisia. And when we look at the map, this one shows you all of the places where amphitheatres are attested, and you can see the real core concentration is in North Africa and central Italy, where I've got those orange circles. It's often said that in the Eastern Mediterranean, amphitheatres, gladiatorial games didn't really take off, catch on, and that is true. But you can see from this map that there are some examples, there are some places where gladiatorial combats and amphitheatres did spread as well. In general, it's the Latin West that really took to this form of ancient entertainment, and one could say the more civilized Greek East preferred not to. Anyway, so thank you for listening, and that's the end of this lecture on amphitheatres.